there has been a lot of work done to figure out, and to some degree it really is trying to predict human nature, which is obviously not something that is doable consistently, at least from my experience. But we really did try to figure out, okay, what are the things that will most likely help us to be able to anticipate what outcome we're going to come around to. The last bullet there, the data piece, certainly the big point to make about data is, in fact, that through this process thus far, and again, I think we've done a pretty thorough job, it has become apparent that a lot of data that would, in fact, be very helpful to this tool and to the bigger challenges that we faced just really is not available. That it is available comes in lots of different forms and styles. So we've worked through the aspects of incorporating it in. We did, due to some good partner sharing, we were able to gain access to the HCIP Gold data, which was very helpful to us, and as it says there, certainly saved us some money. Have worked with data also from the National Shelter System and those other pieces. So I wanted to, before we actually get into the demonstration, which I think is what most of you are on here for, not to listen to me talk, sort of set a framework that we really laid, or we see this process as sort of laying a groundwork, making sure that we're out there connected to other projects that are in a similar vein, that we know that we will not have reached the ultimate conclusion, but feel like we have made a meaningful contribution, and and we're anxious for some feedback and response after we go through the demo. There are a couple more slides I have, but at this point I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues at Azimuth and Matrix, and I think Vic, if you're going to pick up and run a demo, you want to do that, and then we'll come back to me.
Sounds great. Jennifer, are we unmuted now?
Yes, you're good.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for your interest in the project and the work that we've done. Our team consists of Azimuth, who is the prime, and Matrix is the subcontractor, and we work very closely with the GIS Technical Center at West Virginia University. So what we are excited to show you is something that we have had a tremendous amount of fun putting together, developing this application. It's an exciting mixture of artificial intelligence, simulation, and GIS, so Geographic Information Systems. And we've tried to make it very intuitive for the user. And as David had alluded to before, there are so many parameters that we've tried to encapsulate and capture the essence of the right set of parameters to convey what the user would want to be able to simulate. So with that said, this is our modeling and simulation portal. And with this portal, it's a web-based application. You need to have Adobe Flash Player installed, the latest version of Flash, which is a free download. And right now what we're looking at is the login page. So we're going to log in as the administrator right now. And when we log in, just as any normal user would, you see a list of recent simulations. And you then see along the top ribbon there, you see the home page or the home menu, which is where we are now. Since we are administrators, we have a different tab of user management. And we can go ahead and look at user management for a moment. The user management is where you create and manage your different user accounts. So back in mid-April, we had made an account for David during a live demo. So for the purpose of this project, it was determined that all users would have the same role. So therefore, there's really only one distinguishing factor, either an administrator or a normal user. So let's go on over to the My Simulations. So since we logged in as administrator, you can see we've been pretty busy developing a whole set of different simulation types. So just as, if we were logged in as David Hogue or if we were logged in as myself, any simulations that that user has created would show up here in this menu. So from this view, we can see that we can create a new simulation. We can see that we can launch a pre-existing simulation that we've created. We can recompute a simulation, so if we've made any changes to it that we need to change, we want to see what the parameters are for that simulation, or we can delete that simulation. And we're going to jump into this in a little bit. First, I just want to go all the way across the top ribbon first. So let's now go to all simulations. So in this case, again, the admin has been very busy making simulations, but this would show any sims that David Hogue or myself or Joe Belt, anybody would create. It would all be here. Notice here that you can't delete other people's simulations. You can only delete your own. So let's keep going. Let's go to comparative analytics. And this is something that I'm just going to touch on briefly, and then we're going to wow you in a little while with this particular tool. But what you can do with this tool is compare two or more simulations, to see, did this change that I made actually have some kind of noticeable impact. So we will show this tool in a little bit. Reports. So we dump out reports in a variety of different popular formats, comma-separated, PDF files, or XML. We have some options there as well as to, do we want to create a report based on the fuel station name, so group all fuel stations together, group each fuel station over time. So there's some variations there. We'll show you that in a little while too. And then we have a logout button. So that's just your standard logout button. So let's start out and let's create a simulation. So we'll go to New Simulation. Now, as we've talked about a little bit, quite a few parameters that we can enter. But let's see what we're looking at first. So when we go to create a new simulation, we have on the left-hand side, we have some actions that we can take. So we can go back to My Simulations, or we can clear all the parameters. But right now, all the parameters on the right-hand side are cleared. And we also have an option that we can populate fields from a previous simulation. So for the sake of this presentation, we're going to select one to auto-populate the fields that we have. So last time, in April, I put David on the spot. And actually, David, I had neglected to offer you the auto-populate option. So I can imagine you're laughing right now. But so here,
I'll get over it eventually.
Okay. So, here it just makes a copy of that previous sim. So let's start looking down through here what we have. So we've got the name. Let's rename that copy. Let's name it to FEMA Demo. We have an example here. We have 2 million people. Let's keep 2 million people, 4 people per vehicle. So now we look down through. We have the total number of evacuees. So we set that to 2 million. Right now we have an arbitrary cap of 5 million. And I say that's arbitrary because we haven't broke it yet. We've done quite an extensive set of optimizations, so 5 million. And if we need to ramp that up, we certainly can. So out of those evacuees, we can say, right now we just default say 1% of those need minor and 1% need major. Each one of these values is capped, so if you try to put something in outside the range, it gives you a nudge to say, hey, put it back. So now, we don't look at the individual here because we realize that people probably wouldn't be walking; they would be traveling in groups in a vehicle. So here we say, well, how many vehicles are seeking shelter? Well, for this, we start out and we say, well, 0% are seeking shelter. And we have an option that we can say how many vehicles are traveling to a friend or relative within West Virginia. So within that 4-county region. So we mapped out what are the, I think we identified 12 different high population areas within that 4-county region, so that could be a potential destination for people. Or you just have folks that are just traveling through. They're just purely migrating through those 4 counties. So let's change some of these numbers around a little bit. And let's say 40% are seeking shelter. Let's say 30% are traveling to a friend, and 30% are passing through. So we could say 4 people per car. You could say 1 person per car. You could say 10 people per car, or vehicle, rather. So you could imagine that you have all passenger cars, or you have 16 passenger vans, or you have some mixture in between. So for this, let's say 4 people per vehicle. And then each vehicle has a different set of parameters. So that here we can set the miles per gallon for these vehicles. So we say 10 miles per gallon. Again, it's user definable. Average tank capacity 15. And these are just based on some hunches that we have. The user can tweak it however they like. So let's see here, the vehicle fuel level trigger. So that is, at what point do vehicles start looking for fuel? So in this case, we set at 25%. But at a quarter tank, they start looking for fuel. But let's say maybe 50, maybe half tank. They start looking for fuel at half tank. And then as cars come into the 4-county region, we had said that they had a 3/4 tank. So that seems like a reasonable assumption for this simulation. Now, as cars are traveling and they decide that they start realizing that they need to get fuel, then there's a search radius that those cars will start using on our road network. So we set, in this case, the 1-mile search radius. So if a car is within 1 mile of a gas station and it needs fuel, it will then try to get fuel from that fuel station. If that fuel station is empty, it will just keep going to the next fuel station along its destination until it either runs out of gas or finds fuel, or leaves the state, or gets to a shelter, or gets to a hospital, gets to its destination, etc. So let's say 2 miles, a 2-mile search radius. So I want to impress upon you that you can change any of these numbers. So even though we have these auto-populated, you can change them. Sheltering term, let's say that this is we have 2 options. We have an evacuation and we have a post-impact. So the evac has a higher occupancy and the post-impact has a lower occupancy just because of the duration of sheltering. So let's just pick evac. And let's then say as vehicles are traveling, if I had to evacuate right now, if I had to evacuate west, I personally don't know which shelter I would end up at. I would be looking for a shelter as I traveled. So shelters are something that cars look for as the car is trying to leave the area of interest. So in this case, maybe there's signs along the road, maybe there's radio broadcasts about shelters. So let's just say that, as cars are traveling on a road, maybe they have a 5-mile shelter awareness. So if there's a shelter available within 5 miles of where that vehicle is, it'll go to that shelter. Same thing with a hospital, same concept. I know a lot of folks have GPS now, but let's say that this is a 5-mile search radius for a hospital.